Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or Happy Kwanzaa for all 12 of you who celebrate that holiday that white people try to pretend is irrelevant because it helps us make us not feel racist, like we've just going to forget about the fact that we enslaved black people for a really long time. Sorry I don't have festive jingle bells in the background. Those cost money, and this show doesn't make any. So, if you want to sponsor the show, you can do that. But you know what? All right, fine. Here we go. Better intro. This week, we are going to talk about the story of Carl Tanzler, which is just weird. It's a weird story. Let's start the show. It's Our Weird World.
Our Weird World.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever phrase offends you the least out of that. It's just, I'm not going to get on a soapbox on this, but gosh, that's the dumbest argument ever. Anyway, today's episode, is weird. I've already kind of expressed that sentiment. There's not a lot of context for it, so let's just jump into it. Carl Tanzler, also known as Count Karl von Cosel, was born in Germany and traveled throughout Europe as a child because, he was in a wealthy family. During his travels, he was often visited in his dreams by a dead ancestor, who he identified as Countess Anna Constantia von Cosel. And Countess Anna actually revealed the face of his true love, which was an exotic-looking, dark-haired girl, but he never was able to figure out where she was or what her name was or anything like that. Tanzler grew up and went on to fight in World War I for the Germans, and then after the war, he immigrated to the United States and settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida with his sister. Zephyr Hills, if you know anything about regional bottled water, is where, the Southeast gets its bottled water from. I think, North Carolina, where I'm from, gets Deer Park water, but Florida, instead of Deer Park, they have Zephyr Hills. So, fun bottled water trivia. Anyway, shortly after his wife and his two daughters arrived to live with him, Tanzler actually then turned around and left his family to take a job as a radiologic technologist at the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West. He didn't divorce them or anything. It's just, they were living in Zephyr Hills and, which if I'm not mistaken, is around Tampa or in that, central Florida area. And then, Tanzler just took this job as a technologist down in Key West. On April 22nd, 1930, a Cuban-American woman brought her daughter, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, known locally as Helen, because, why not, brought her into the hospital for an exam. And when Tanzler saw her, he immediately recognized the girl as the exotic lady from his dreams as a child. Because, obviously, why else would I have thrown that detail in there? Unfortunately for Tanzler, Helen was already legally married to Luis Mesa, even though Luis had left her and moved to Miami after Helen had a miscarriage for the couple's first child, which is kind of sad. To make things worse for everyone, Helen was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which at the time was a highly fatal condition. But Tanzler, still believing that Helen was the literal girl of his dreams, did everything he could to treat her condition and nurse her back to health, including electrotherapy, giving her all kinds of medicines, and shooting her full of x-rays, which, probably made things actually a lot worse. He even gave her jewelry and clothing because he knew that giving girls things makes them feel better. Totally 100%. Not even going to question him on that. Although he constantly then professed his love for her, which was probably really creepy, Helen never felt the same way and then died over a year later from tuberculosis in her parents' home. Despite that constant rejection, Tanzler paid for Helen's funeral, and he even constructed an above-ground mausoleum in the Key West Cemetery so he could visit her every night. And for the next 2 years, that's exactly what he did. He went to the cemetery and spent time at Helen's grave. And according to Carl, Helen's spirit often visited him at the gravesite so that Carl could sing her favorite Spanish song, which, strangely enough, was Ricky Martin's 1999 hit "Livin' La Vida Loca." And that's a joke on like a couple of levels. All right, first of all, like, when was the last time you thought about Ricky Martin and "Livin' La Vida Loca"? But then also, La Vida Loca translates, I do believe, to the crazy life. And Carl Tanzler is crazy at this point. All right. I know I've explained the joke now so that it's not even funny, but that actually just makes it funnier for me. All right. Anyway, it's my show. Get over it. Instead, the reality is like probably way worse. 2 years after Helen's death, Carl sneaked into the cemetery one night, exhumed Helen's body from the mausoleum, put it in a toy wagon, and took her back to his house. And once Carl got the body home, he reattached her bones with wire and coat hangers. He put glass eyes in her sockets, and he replaced her decomposing skin with silk cloth soaked in wax and plaster of Paris. It's insane, but he's not done. When the rest of Helen's hair fell out, Carl placed a wig made of her original hair that her mother had collected for him, what is going on there? Like, moms, if your daughter is constantly rejecting a guy and then your daughter dies, don't give him her hair. That's gross and weird. Who's doing that? Like, is that a cultural thing? I don't think it's a cultural thing. Anyway, I'm going off the rails. To make sure that Helen kept her original figure, Carl then stuffed her with rags and dressed her in stockings, jewelry, and gloves. And with the outer aesthetics complete, Carl, I'm not lying here, Carl then shoved a paper tube inside her so that he could make love to her. Oh, you Germans. You Germans are so weird. And like, I don't know what's worse. Like, the fact that he, kind of manufactured a sex doll out of this dead corpse, or the fact that he kept Helen's body in his bed for, I kid you not, 7 years. Gross, man. 7 years. 7 years. There was a dead body in this dude's bed. Finally, rumors began to circulate that Carl was actually sleeping with a corpse, probably because he was walking around town with his crotch smelling like roadkill. And Helen's sister eventually heard the rumors and confronted Carl at his home, barged inside, went to his bedroom, and much to her likely horror, found her sister's body, which at this point was really just a mannequin wearing all her old stuff, in his bed. And I mean, like, that's gross. When word really got out about Carl's corpse romance, people were actually generally sympathetic toward him, calling him an eccentric romantic, because honestly, why would anyone in the Keys find this behavior odd in any way? Like, people who live in the Keys are a weird group of people. Not going to lie. We'll have, another story, about the Keys later on, but I mean, Robert the Doll, Eugene Otto, and the where Robert lives happened in Key West. So this does not surprise me in the least. Charges against Carl Tanzler were eventually dropped because the statute of limitations for necrophilia had expired, which I didn't think was even possible. Like, how do you, there's some double entendre there. How do necrophilia charges expire when one of the victims has already expired? Badum tiss. Hey, here we go. Full of bad jokes in this one. Sorry. Helen's corpse was eventually returned to the Key West Cemetery and placed in an unmarked grave to prevent anyone, especially Carl, from going back. Carl eventually did move back to Zephyr Hills, where his now ex-wife supported him in his final years. As Carl, one last little parting gift, I guess, as Carl left the Keys in a van with all of his belongings, an explosion rang out in the Key West Cemetery. And when residents arrived to investigate the blast, they found the front section of Helen's original mausoleum torn away. Police investigated the incident and quickly surmised that Carl had rigged the mausoleum with dynamite as a final parting gift to the Keys, but without any tangible evidence to convict him and probably not wanting to keep this creepy necrophiliac around, authorities just kind of left the case unsolved and just kind of let it go. Back in Zephyr Hills, despite being physically separated from his true love, Carl went on to create a life-size effigy of Helen and used a death mask he had made of Helen's face shortly after her original death, which so weird, but also kind of romantic in a way if you're into that kind of dark stuff. I don't know. Carl eventually died in 1952, with some accounts actually saying his body was discovered with the effigy in his arms. Aww. But, others say that he died behind one of his organs, not like his bodily organs, but like a piano organ. And I mean, look, why do you need more than one organ in your house? That's also strange. But, coming from Carl, it's probably the least strange thing about him. And that is the end of his story. So there we go. The story of Carl Tanzler. That one's always fun. That's one of the more adorable figures from human history that often gets forgotten. But let's see what we learned today from all of this.
What did we learn?
Number one, regardless of what kind of dreams you have, if you go up to someone multiple times and profess your love for them and they reject you, it's not your soulmate, all right? So just let it go. Number two, do not exhume corpses of people that you love. Harking back to the Ed Gein episode, don't do it, period. Whether you love them or not, it's gross and probably unsanitary. All right. Number three, definitely, above all else, don't have sex with a corpse. That's weird and gross. Next week on Our Weird World, we wrap up 2020 with another strange story, the Dole Air Race. I know that doesn't mean anything to you right now, but it's basically a race with airplanes, and it did not go well. And so you'll learn all about that next week. As always, thank you for listening. Keep telling your friends until everyone has told a friend, and, keep it weird. But not like Carl Tanzler. Weird. Don't go that far.